Ladies and gentlemen, the day has finally come. We are finally getting to take a look at the complete animations for the brand new AGL Super Saiyan Goku and Super Saiyan Vegeta, as well as the brand new Fizz LR Metal Cooler. We have been hyping up these guys for a long time, and honestly, I have never been more conflicted on a set of animations, or at least have not been this conflicted on a set of animations in a long time. I've rewatched Goku and Vegeta's animations and, of course, Coolers, but they're going to be in the video after this one for a few times now, and not to mention I did just rewatch the movie the other day, so the actual anime is very fresh in my mind, and I really don't know how to feel about these going into this. I'm very conflicted. So I'm hoping that after we take a more detailed look at these units, that I will have a more solid answer to you on how I feel about these guys. So as always, we are going to watch their animations in 1x speed first, go through it on the regular, and then we will, of course, take a look at them in the breakdown. We will also take a look at the unfeatured unit, because, I mean, it's in here anyway, and it's, like, really quick, so why not, right? I will say, before we even get into it, I think this is one of the worst unfeatured featured unit essays in a while, honestly. When I saw this, I was kind of disappointed. I almost thought it was a free-to-play unit or something, but no. With these guys, by the way, one thing I will say that's really interesting about them, not talking about any of the details, is that they combine different moments from when Goku is just fighting Cooler, and then they add in some of the things from when Vegeta joined in the fight and they're both fighting Cooler, which I think is really interesting that they sort of mix that together a little bit for the 12 key super, and then obviously for their 18 key here, you have the, you know, just actual attack from what happens in the movie. They're not really mixing much together here. I don't think Goku does the Kamehameha at the end, though, which is interesting. Obviously, here we have the active scale where they are facing the Metal Cooler army, which this looks really, really good. I think if I had to choose, this is easily their best-looking animation, in my opinion. This one or the 18 key. This animation does look really, really good, though. It's super fantastic, if I do say so myself. And interestingly enough, this is a quote-unquote costume change. They call this a morale boost in the kit, which is very goofy if I do say so myself. But this is one of those costume change units that's like a technical costume change, but it's not actually a costume change unit. I believe akin rather to Krillin and Gohan. And the KO screen, I'm glad they added that in with the both of them falling to the planet. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into this here. So we'll give you the slow-mo on these guys' animations. However, I don't have too much to say about these. I will say they are just not really that great in my opinion. They are quite literally just PNGs sliding across the screen. You can see here with all of Krillin's attacks, they are not very fluid at all, right? And obviously when it comes to unfeatured featured units, right, the featured banner unit as people like to call it, right, you don't expect their animations to be of the same quality as the actual Dokkan Fest, of course, and I never want to judge this type of unit that way because obviously holding it to the same standard of quality is frankly ridiculous. However, we have seen many, many more unfeatured featured banner units that have looked so much better than this in recent time, that this is kind of a shame to see how this ended up. Obviously, with Krillin here, we have a ton of the asset fading that if you've been watching the series for a while, you know I am not a fan of because it just doesn't look great in practice. And it makes these weird, obviously ghostly effects. And of course, you basically just have essentially a slideshow, right? Rather than fluid movements on the character. I am honestly shocked how bad this animation looks. This is definitely the part where they put all of the budget, right? Gohan is pretty well animated here. Obviously, they have the motion speed lines in a very nice perspective with the background. Obviously, having the sky sort of be there. I will say, I don't really like that this goes from here to here. I kind of wish there was a little bit more animation in between. You know, Gohan putting his head down there. But, I mean, the hair is animated nicely. His clothes, obviously, move a little bit in the wind, which is cool. This part is obviously where they put all the resources for the animation. And I will say, it is interesting that this is supposed to be like him cutting through the guard with this light effect here, right? But it doesn't really feel like it has a lot of payoff because you have this really cool effect. This almost feels like more like a sword attack or like a ki attack rather than Gohan simply just, you know, punching this guy through. Or in this case, quite literally just, you know, punching past him. And that also might be a Dokkan Sprite L, which unfortunately there will be a lot of examples of that in today's analysis. But it just feels a little bit out of place for an animation like this. I guess it kind of makes it feel a little bit better because obviously then it's something a little bit more interesting to look at. But here, right, we have Gohan basically just slide down. And as far as I can see here, I really cannot tell. Like, I'm struggling to see if there is minimal movement here. I really don't think there is. I really think that that is just a PNG that they had slide forward. And then obviously for this section, especially, the PNG is literally just flying forward. Gohan's hair doesn't even move in this section, which is crazy to me for a modern SA, even for these unfeatured units, right? Usually they look a lot better than this. Like, this looks like a unfeatured unit from a couple years ago, frankly, right? It almost feels like they took this unit from a few years ago, to be honest with you, and then slapped it into this celebration. That's kind of how this one made me feel. Then obviously we have the punch, right? Which this effect is a... I don't know if this is new. This looks very old to me. Maybe this is something they made specifically for this SA, but it is quite old looking, which is interesting. It doesn't help that it has the black background because that's obviously something that a lot of older Dokkan SAs do. When it comes to trying to show like the impact, it's not as much like, I guess it's technically an impact frame, but I don't know, it feels kind of like a cheap excuse for one, right? We have this section here where you can actually see that Gohan's hair is animated a little bit here, and Krillin's obi belt is actually animated a little bit here as well, with the explosion in the background and of course the anime speed line so far. And that is basically the end of the attack. So yeah, I don't know, it's kind of disappointing how this one turned out, honestly. I think this one may actually just be bad, to be honest with you. Like, I don't think I've seen a Dokkan animation in recent time, even if I don't think they're up to snuff or I haven't really like thought that they were as good as they could be. I don't think anything in recent time has really been bad. This may be the first one that I could genuinely say that for. But let's go ahead and move on to Goku and Vegeta now. So one thing I will say with these animations is that I think overall for Goku and Vegeta, they actually capture the style and the shading and the coloring in the movie pretty well. From watching the movie, and we watched it in pretty good quality, this is basically spot on. Like, this is almost perfect to the T, the coloring in the movie. I think they did a great job representing it in that way, for sure. So, of course, we have this nice shot of Goku and Vegeta standing here with their hair moving and the aura also looking very, very nice. No movement on the clothes for this, but I mean, it's kind of too far for it to really matter, to be honest with you. Like, I think that's fine. We have Goku begin to stance up here and obviously move forward, right? I will say, this transition between assets here is okay for this beginning part. Though I will say it is a little bit awkward as we go from this to this. Especially that, like, he doesn't, I don't know, just lift his legs up. It's almost like they took a shot of him getting ready to get into a stance. And then they cut to a scene of him flying forward. Which, I mean, is kind of literally what happens here. But it feels like there should be a little bit more in between these two shots. And it's kind of funny because obviously these are quote-unquote lower quality, but obviously that's because they're farther away. They don't look bad in terms of low quality. They're low quality literally with the size of the assets, right? And obviously we change into this, which is much more high quality because obviously this zooms towards the screen and this is actually going to be in your face. So of course they want it to look good, right? Now, what is interesting about this one, too, is that the hand transition here is really, really quick, right? You can see we go from, well, I mean, this hand transition, yes, where it looks kind of goofy that his hand gets so big, but obviously that's because he's changing positions to fly forward. But they move his hand to here really quickly. Like, I'm surprised that there's not one more frame in between that, because then obviously his hand pretty much stays there the whole time. Obviously there is some minimal movement in there as his hand sort of moves forward a little bit, but it's interesting that they sort of just have it go back and forth, I guess. Goku's hair does move a little bit here, which is cool. You can see a tiny bit of movement there. And obviously we had the key dissipate, which does look pretty good. And obviously the asset in and of itself, right, actually looks super, super great. Can we get a shot? Oh, they do us so dirty not letting us see Goku's full face because of the cut-in. That is really unfortunate. Yeah, you can see the hair tufts flying a little bit there. It is interesting to me that they don't have the key dissipate with a little bit more frames, because usually they're pretty spot on about that. But this is like the aura is covering him, and now it's almost already gone, right, as it's charging forward. I think that's really interesting that there's not a little bit more in between that, because usually I feel like there is. With this as well, right, it is interesting that they still kind of have Goku, or I'm sorry, Vegeta in the background, rather, stance up, but he sort of like waits for Goku, which, I mean, I don't know, because the 18 key is obviously the attack where they attack together. So it's interesting to me that they have Vegeta begin to squat here, right? And then they, once Goku is in the, like, center of the frame here, I guess you would say, right? You can see Vegeta begin to stance up in the background. And that actually does mask, oh no, they didn't do that. Wow, interesting. See, I would have thought a way better way to do this, and they've actually done this a lot in a lot of the modern animations, is where when they take, or well, actually maybe not the modern animations as much, but I feel like a lot of animations we've taken out recently in videos, I guess would be the better thing to say. Modern, I guess, because I just took a look at them, modern in my brain, where they sort of hide the asset transitions behind something else going on, right? You would think that for this, right, they wouldn't show this frame here, and they would just have Vegeta already be like this, because Goku completely covers him up here, right? This last frame, you cannot see Vegeta at all, and literally the aura is the same anyway there, right? So I don't think that anybody would have even noticed this changing in the background to this. I am very surprised that they didn't do that. Vegeta also, too, I guess could use a couple more frames in terms of his transition to the standing position there, but I think it's alright. Definitely doesn't look too bad. Again, though, I will say, same thing for Vegeta. It is a little bit jarring going from this to this immediately. His pose is a little bit better because obviously it looks like he's actually floating and then beginning to fly forward. But the transition of the assets is so drastic, and like the shading there, right, is so different that I feel like it's really attention grabbing with how different it is, right? So obviously we have Vegeta fly forward, which he looks very well animated. Obviously his arms are moving a little bit. His hair flows a little bit here. We have the key look very, very nice, right? Same thing with him too, how the key sort of dissipates, not like, I don't know, I feel like as fluid, where they sort of have it cut to the end of it dissipating. It doesn't look too bad in full motion though by any means. I'll say Vegeta's face here, I feel like does look the slightest bit off. I can't really put my finger on it what exactly it is, but something about it feels a hair off. I don't know. You can let me know in the comments what you think about that one. So obviously here we transition to the card art, which this is pretty cool. I'm assuming this is the TUR, because usually for the 12 key they use the TUR art. So that's pretty cool. I'm wondering what the SSR art is actually going to be then. Okay. So this part is really good. I will say a little bit of this is stinky sprites at play here, but we'll get into that. So this is the section that I was talking about here, where they combine different parts of the animations, right? So of course we have Goku dash forward here, again, just the PNG. But then we have him give Cooler the beatdown, right? And this is basically just a bunch of PNGs moving with some impact, little effects here, right? As he basically slides across. Normally, you know that, oh my, let's get to that in a moment. Normally, you know that I would kind of be like, for this sort of thing. However, this is pretty much how it was in the movie, when Goku and Metal Cooler are fighting in this section, it is basically just PNG simulator where it's ha 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 ha, because it's supposed to be like they're moving so fast, throwing all these punches with each other and just sliding across the landscape, right? I think this is fine, right? I think this works pretty well for the animation that it's trying to represent, right? I will say, I do kind of wish it was a little bit closer. I know in the movie it was kind of far away, but I wish it was just a tad bit pulled in. Just a little bit. It is kind of unfortunate too with how the sprite is, right? They literally have two expressions to change between for Cooler. Again, obviously that's more of an L on the sprites rather than the actual animations. But I feel like it's something worth noting, right? Okay, so then obviously we have this interesting section at the end here where they sort of zoom in a little bit to Goku, giving the final beatdown here as they begin to slide off screen. By the way, I do want to comment as well, the smoke and rock effects throughout this whole animation look really, really good. I think they nailed that for sure. And not to mention, like I said, the whole style of this movie is pretty well represented. I think the background also looks very, very nice. Okay, so again, unfortunately, stinky sprite moment here, but this is on the screen for quite literally milliseconds. Funny enough, actually, with this section of Cooler getting kicked by Vegeta here, where it's the close-up before it cuts away to... Please? Thank you. Before it cuts away to this section, I didn't actually see this the first time, or the second time, or the third time that I watched these. I legit did not even notice that this was in here. This is so quick. I feel like this section should have been a little bit more focused on. I don't know. But obviously, again, the sprite is on screen for so long, you really don't even see it. But Vegeta's leg looks good, and obviously the kick looks just fine. They actually do a really good job here of making this feel a lot more lifelike, and I am shocked. Because usually, I mean, I guess I should be a little bit less shocked. Because I think some modern animations have done this, but I feel like it's a little bit rare to see where the asset sort of interacts with a little bit more accuracy against the sprite. I guess we have seen that kind of in some recent animations, but I feel like not to this degree. This is actually done very, very well. You know, obviously what they're doing here is they're layering the sprite in between Vegeta's leg in the background and Vegeta's foot in the foreground, right? To sort of give it like this effect that he's actually kicking the sprite. I think that's done very well, and the actual animation itself is very fluid. That's pretty cool. I actually did not notice that. I wish it was a little bit longer, so it was a little bit more featured in the animation. Now, obviously, we have this part here where, of course, this is the section where Vegeta saves Goku, because obviously this is where Goku's getting choked out, and Vegeta comes through and kicks Cooler in the head, right? So, one thing to note about this before we look at like the actual animation itself is that, yeah, this is kind of what I was talking about with this. These animations are very interesting because, again, this section here, right, is from when Goku is just fighting Cooler by himself. And obviously with this, right, this is when Vegeta comes and saves Goku from Cooler. Now, I understand that this is more of a thing of like, they can't really implement that. Obviously there's not a sprite of the character choking out the other characters, so they can't really have Goku get choked out if they wanted to. But it just feels a little bit weird because obviously this happens so much later in the fight, and also Vegeta is base form for this, which is interesting. But obviously Dokkan takes animations from different forms and uses them for the forms that they want all the time. They did that with Birdku very heavily for these animations, right? But I think it's just something interesting to note, and it makes these animations, I feel like, flow a little bit weird in my opinion. But anyway, yeah, so this looks pretty good. In the slow-mo, it looks a little bit weird, but funny enough, that's sort of because in the actual animation itself, it literally is in slow-mo, which that's because in the movie, it's in slow motion. So I think that that is pretty cool. Let's actually take a look at that in the full motion real quick. Yeah, so you can see it's in the little bit of a slow-mo before Cooler actually flies forward at full speed, which is cool, because again, that's accurate to the movie, right? Now, I will say, this is a little bit weird for me because this is basically just a PNG here with Vegeta, right? They do a good job of sort of making this feel like this kick was pretty impactful because of the rocks that are sort of breaking around, obviously of the dust effects and stuff. But I really would have liked to see a lot more movement on Vegeta here. I feel like even in animations like this where it's such a quick scene or even a quick kick, right? Usually there is a little bit of minimal movement to really bring the animation home and make it feel a lot more lifelike, especially with modern animations, right? His arms should be moving a little bit, his leg should be falling a little bit, right? Maybe his other leg moving a little bit, certainly his hair fluttering a little bit, right? They kind of do that, like on the very last couple of frames they have it shift, but it doesn't shift all the way through, which is so strange to me. I don't know, because most modern Dokkan animations, I feel like, nail that pretty well, right? Or at least animations that are of this quality, this high tier. So it's weird to see them backpedaling a little bit with this sort of thing. Obviously, we have Cooler fly forward. This is a pretty cool perspective shot. Obviously, they use the ground moving to sort of make it feel like Cooler is flying forward, right? I definitely like that little bit of perspective there for sure. We have Cooler smash into the rock. And obviously, this is where things get a little bit weird, right? Because we have Cooler fly out the other side. And then this part looks fine, right? Where he goes through the rock, right? The rocks don't really break, which, I mean, would have been cool to see, I guess. But, I mean, you know, this works, obviously. And I believe this is how it went down in the movie. The smoke effect also looks just fine, right? I mean, it's so small that it's not as noticeable. But, I mean, it looks good, right? Then, obviously, we have this shot of Goku, which is a pretty iconic shot from the movie. And I think they did this pretty well, right? Goku's little minimal movements here are very well animated, right? Again, so many other parts of the animation that we've even seen just so far, I feel like should have been animated like this, where you have these little bits fluttering about here, but they were just static PNGs, or I guess I should say, yeah, static PNGs is the right word. But again, this is weird because obviously it goes from Goku's solo fight to Vegeta kicking him to now Goku fighting him again, which again, I understand it's because they're compiling the different attacks in the movie, but in my mind, right, it just makes it flow a little bit weird. So obviously we have Goku charge forward. I will say, this animation here does feel a little bit weird to me. Not this section specifically, right? I think the background looks fine. I think Goku looks just fine here. But this, they just cut from Goku with his face on the screen to him then busting through the rocks here, which here's the busting of the rocks that I wanted. I think the rock crushing part looks great, right? And I think Goku's aura is animated fantastic. The actual dust clouds as well are also very well animated. Like that whole section, solid, very solid. But I feel like this cut is a little bit awkward, if I'm being honest. Like, I remember when I watched these for the first time, I was watching them for this video, I saw this cut here, and then it cut into Goku breaking through the rocks, and I was like, wait, did I miss something in between? But no, that is quite literally how it goes. And maybe it is just me, but I feel like that's such a, I don't know, it's a little bit of an awkward transition to me. Like, maybe it would have felt a little bit more natural if they would have had Goku, like, charge forward into the camera like they do in some Dokkan essays, or have sort of an effect where he flies back and then flies forward. I don't know. Just felt a little bit off to me, personally. So obviously we have Goku break through the rocks here. And of course we have the first time that he punches Metal Cooler, right? I think the dust looks good here. Obviously Goku moving forward looks fantastic here, right? Very, very nicely animated. Again, the dust clouds. Oh, they good at Dokkan dust clouds, that's for darn sure here. Yeah, unfortunately, again, a little bit of a weird thing with the sprites, because obviously not every unit is going to be Metal Cooler who would be taking an attack like this. And of course, it's still weird because it's just a generic like character flying back. And Cooler doesn't actually break apart. They have this debris fly off of him. But obviously, it's just supposed to represent him breaking. So that does feel a little bit weird, but again, sprite moment. Anyhow, this also to me doesn't really feel as impactful as it could. Maybe it's just because it's so far away from view, but this is quite literally just the PNG sliding into the other PNG and having this little effect of like the white and the little impact circle here, which this impact circle specifically really reminds me of older essays a lot. Like, I feel like this is an old assay effect that they've reused. And most likely it's not. Most likely it was made for this. But that makes me feel a little bit weird about these animations, because it almost makes me feel like they're they're a little bit aged as I'm looking at them already, just because I'm seeing some of these effects that seem a little bit older. Nonetheless, though, there is not really a lot of movement on Goku here. I feel like the punch should have a little bit more follow through, and the impact just doesn't feel impactful to me, right? There is a little bit of minimal movement here at the end. You can see Goku, even though they are moving the PNG a little bit, his legs and his arms actually do move slightly, right? Very slightly, which is good. And then obviously we cut, oh boy, to this section. Again, huge sprite moment here. Again, this is not really the animation's fault for Cooler looking so strange here. But of course, you know, that's just because they don't really have a better way to do the Dokkan sprites. Honestly, I kind of wish it would have been flipped the other way, because I feel like that would have made more sense if, like, his head was facing towards the right. But, you know, what are you going to do? Dokkan sprite moment indeed on this one, 100%. It is interesting to me, too, that what they do here for this, right, is they have, obviously, the quote-unquote follow-through. And then they have it followed up by this shot. Now, before I actually say that, I was actually going to say something about this shot specifically, but the one thing I wanted to note before we hit that was the coloring change is so drastic. And not to mention the shading on Goku and these like really thick black lines kind of feels a little bit out of place with the rest of the animations that have been in this so far. I don't know. It feels like this is almost looks like a little bit of a different art style here. And again, the background changes. Very drastic. This actual animation, though, I think this looks fine. Again, this is actually in slow motion in the movie, so that's why this is so slow to click through, because in the animation itself, it is actually in slow-mo, which is cool because obviously, again, that's how it was in the movie, so it's accurate to the movie. It's also interesting to me, they have this follow-up shot here, right? Obviously, this is the shot that follows up Cooler punching Goku. I really feel like this should have gotten a lot more close to the camera, because this is as close as it gets before it goes to this shot. Goku was definitely closer to Cooler, or closer to the camera rather, I guess I should say, in the Cooler movie, there we go, than this shot, right? This feels definitely a little bit too far back, for sure. I digress though, with this shot, it is a little bit of a shame because, I mean, again, sprite moment with this one, but Goku himself does not have any movement at all. He is literally just a PNG turn in here. And again, I know for some people this might not feel like such a big deal, but with most of the modern animations that I've seen, right, especially units who are supposed to be these, you know, huge celebration units, they all, you know, tout this very, very nice looking, you know, minimal movement in all these places that make it feel really animated, you know, a lot more like the anime, I guess, a lot more high quality, not in terms of how it looks, but the actual animation itself, how it's animated, right? So it's just very strange to me to see all these moments throughout this super attack where it feels like that's not the case. Moving on here, obviously, we now have Vegeta's section here, and this, I guess, is another part that, just off of that point before, I'm not going to focus on it too much because, again, I don't think it's really that big of a deal, especially in terms of the quality of the animations themselves. But again, this is the part where Goku and Metal Cooler are looking up at Vegeta, right? Obviously, after they were fighting a little bit, and then, of course, he does the Big Bang attack. So, again, kind of mix and matching the scenes a little bit, which is interesting. So, of course, for this part, we have Vegeta teleport in, which I gotta say, the teleport effect does look very, very nice. I think they did a very good job of that. Obviously, the smoke effect looks good too, but it is a little bit ruined by, again, sprite moment. I can't knock the animations for what the sprites do, right? And of course, you just have them sort of lay there. This is cool that they have this animation of Vegeta's hand just immediately going into the Big Bang pose. I think that looks fantastic because obviously most of the time when Vegeta does the Big Bang attack, he flicks his wrist into position, right? So I think that's cool. And obviously that's a nice way to not only emphasize the attack, but obviously give you a nice close-up shot, which does make me wonder here. I wonder why they didn't, like, have him more in frame for that. I mean, in this scene, it is framed like this. Obviously, Goku and Cooler are looking up at Vegeta here, so I guess that's why it's in this framing, but I'm kind of curious why they didn't maybe just do like a zoom in of Vegeta, right? Like a shot almost like, funny enough, the Dragon Ball Heroes Big Bang Attack Vegeta, where they have the close-up of him may have worked really good there. But anyway, we have the key form in Vegeta's hand, which I have to say, they absolutely nailed the actual coloring on this, right? You can see as soon as this illuminates, there's a little bit of light flowing over Vegeta, and you can see here that the actual lighting changes around him, and he gets a little bit more of a darker shadow on the back of him, which is cool. Obviously, that is a very good job on the lighting, and this is super neat, I have to say, with the way that they animated the Big Bang attack. I think they did a really good job with it. First of all, even though it is just a circle in the beginning, they have these little cracks of energy that sort of spew out of the attack, which is really, really cool, and obviously makes this feel a lot less like just a generic beam attack. Then, of course, we have it begin to hit the ground, which I think this is super cool that they actually have this effect in here, and not to mention really well done, which obviously it collides with the ground a little bit before it covers up Goku and Cooler there, right? The rock effects look great there too, and obviously we have the rock sort of break free from the ground because obviously the attack collided with the ground, and then a faraway shot here, which this shot looks really good. I feel like smoke shots and ki blasts are very underappreciated when it comes to animations in Dokkan, and I think they absolutely nailed it for this one here. Looks really, really good, if I do say so myself. They definitely did a good job with that, especially to the explosion in the beginning, right? It is only there for just a little bit, but you can see the rocks break off of it, right? And a little bit of the smoke effects before, obviously, the impact frame, and then we have the actual smoke. Again, this is, funny enough, sort of what I was talking about. I wonder why they didn't do that with Goku blocking Vegeta, where they just did that with an impact frame for this animation here. Okay, so now we move on to the 18 key super attack. The 18 key super is quite interesting here. This shot of Goku from the get-go looks pretty good, if I do say so myself, right? We obviously have Goku powering up here. The key looks good, and I really, really like these impact frames here to sort of emphasize the key swelling around him, and obviously immediately the aura snaps on, right? Because you can see it form a little bit, and then it's like, that looks great, and obviously very Dragon Ball-esque for sure. Goku's hair also moving a little bit there, which is pretty nice. We, of course, have this shot of Vegeta 2 with a similar thing with the impact frames that look really, really good. And, of course, the aura surrounding him, which looks nice. Both of these shots look good. His hair does look very spread out here. It looks very messy, because usually his hair is a lot more like in a comb, but it feels kind of spread in this shot, which is sort of interesting. He's also missing his other little hair tuft, unless it's supposed to be, like, behind his shoulder, but here it's on the front of it. I don't know. Kind of interesting. Okay, so, of course, for this animation, this is the iconic part of the shot, right? Those close-ups look pretty good, right? And it's obviously cool that they sort of emphasize the fact that Goku and Vegeta are powering up. However, one thing I will say that is a little bit weird about that is they make it a point to have them be enveloped in aura, right? But then you cut to this shot, and neither of them are enveloped in aura? That's a little weird if you ask me. Like, I guess you could say maybe this is Vegeta's aura sort of dissipating in the background here, but Goku certainly does not have the aura going on here, right? I don't know. That is definitely a little bit strange, if you ask me. Now, let's talk about the animation itself here, right, for them charging forward. First of all, you do have a very nice smoke cloud, and again, the energy behind Vegeta looks really good. That sprite for Goku there kind of looks like an actual sprite to me. It's very weirdly placed. Like, I don't think Goku was squatted up like that in the movie. I don't know, maybe I'm just not remembering it right, but it definitely feels a little bit off, if I do say so myself. However, Vegeta charging forward looks pretty good. You do have a little bit of minimal movement there, which is very nice to see. That asset transition is pretty drastic. However, in full motion, again, this does happen pretty quickly, so your eye doesn't really catch it as much. We can watch it in full motion in a moment here. Interestingly enough, though, after that minimal movement in the beginning, Vegeta really has none as this PNG just sort of flies towards the screen. And then, of course, we have Goku follow suit with his ki behind him. And, of course, then his is a little bit harder to see because obviously it's so far away for the asset transition that it's harder to tell that it's there than Vegeta's. And, of course, we have him fly forward again. Literally just a PNG moving towards the screen, right? It's especially easy to see when they don't have the smoke moving in the background for this section, right? You can literally just see the PNG move forward here, right? Even the speed lines are like not even moving. They're literally just there, static. Wow. That's weird. Interesting. Okay, so we have Goku fly towards the screen. Now, thankfully, this shot looks fantastic, right? I think they absolutely nailed this with Goku and Vegeta flying forward. Goku and Vegeta's hair and their clothes moving a little bit in the wind, right? As well, too. Obviously, Vegeta opening his mouth first, followed by Goku, right? Goku's head lifting up a little bit. You have these rapid anime speed lines here, which also look fantastic, if I do say so myself, right? This shot looks great. The background moving is perfect, right? I think this shot is super well done. And I like as well, too, that they actually have in the beginning of this, let me go back to the very start, right? Where they actually have Goku sort of come up on Vegeta, which is good because not only is it accurate to the movie, but obviously Goku flies after Vegeta sort of and then moves to his side to sort of catch up with him. So I'm glad that it wasn't just Goku already by his side because this feels a lot more accurate to the anime and obviously makes more sense. Okay, so after this shot here, we of course have the iconic shots of Goku and Vegeta flying forward. This looks really, really nice here for sure, right? Obviously, with them shooting forward, the ki looks so good, by the way. That literally looks just like the movie and the style of the anime from that era. Absolutely, right? I think they nailed that 100%. We're not going to talk about the stinky sprite again, but the perspective on the ground looks cool. Obviously, using that perspective to sort of give you the, well, perspective, I guess, to make your eyes sort of think that the enemy is moving forward here, which is cool. And obviously, in this actual scene in the movie, this is sort of a nice reference to the movie because Cooler is moving almost like in slow motion, but still very fast in like the heat waves. For this section as he's coming at Goku and Vegeta. I kind of wish they would have done something like that, like maybe made the screen a little bit more blurry so it's almost like they're coming through those heat waves, right? But unfortunately, it is just the sprite flying forward, which they definitely could have done something like that because they have done like different blur effects on animations before. We've taken a look at them in different animation analysis videos in the past, so I'm kind of surprised that they didn't do that, honestly. But anyway, we have both of them fly forward. Their ki looks really, really nice here, if I do say so myself. Again, I think they nailed this for sure. The style of this is very reminiscent to the movie. I think they did a good job with that. The ground even, too, looks just like the anime. Okay, so we have the boys charge forward here. Obviously, the enemy sprite moving towards them. We have them enter the frame sort of coated in aura here. Ooh. Ooh, that's a very interesting impact frame. Interesting. Okay, so that is, again, basically just there to sort of emphasize that. Maybe that's also to make you feel like, oh, they're breaking them apart. But that's interesting that that's there, the frame before they make contact. Obviously, again, because it is just there for a frame, it sort of tricks your eyes into not really seeing it. But that is pretty cool, actually. Okay, so then of course we have this very nicely animated aura. Again, the style is perfect to the movie, right? Obviously, they are smashing into Cooler here. This whole section looks very, very good. We have an impact frame with some rocks to sort of transition into the next scene here. I kind of wish they would have faded out from white rather than just cutting in, but it's okay. Then, obviously, we have Goku and Vegeta moving forward here, which, again, this shot is in slow motion in the movie, so it's really cool to see that they actually kept that in here. The minimal movement on them is nice. There is actually a little bit of movement on their arms, right, and obviously Goku's mouth a little Did I catch that right? Yeah, Goku opens his mouth a little bit there too, which is pretty cool. But yeah, Vegeta's arm you can see moving, Goku's arm you can see moving, and obviously the hair. That section looks very, very nice. The tumble down, I think they pretty much nailed it, honestly. This was one part that I was really hoping that they would do well, because this part is so, like, I don't know if it's supposed to be silly in the movie, but it's sort of unintentionally silly, but obviously they're moving so fast that they sort of stumble to catch themselves. And I actually think this part is done pretty well. It is very goofy in slow motion here. This literally looks like a Looney Tunes cartoon with them like tumbling into place here. But I think they did a pretty good job with it, right? Obviously, it makes it feel like they're really struggling to catch their feet, right? So I think, yeah, they did a pretty good job on this section. Honestly, no complaints from me. I will say, funny enough, Vegeta's asset here looks a little bit more like an older Dokkan asset. It just kind of reminds me of it, but yeah, no, these look pretty good. I definitely like this section. Again, I think with this, right, maybe they could have done a couple more in-between frames, but I feel like with less in-between frames and you have sort of just having this, like, you know, almost cartoon-esque falling, again, it emphasizes the sort of, I don't know, shenanigans that are going on here for them to eventually get to their feet, right? Of course, though, we have Goku and Vegeta finally land steady before they stand to their feet to then blast Cooler away. Now, one thing I will say about this whole sequence afterward here, where they then, of course, blast Cooler, is that I do feel like for them standing, very nice transition, by the way, to the card art. For them standing up, I feel like there should be a lot more animation. Like, for them actually coming to their feet, it is pretty much a frame by frame. I want to watch this section real quick in the actual... Ooh, I didn't even notice that dust cloud the first time, too. That's cool. That's really well done, for sure. I want to see that again, because I want to see how it looks with them actually standing to their feet, right? We have them fall forward. Yeah, again, that looks pretty good. It looks a little bit choppy. Like, again, this part I feel like it makes a little bit more sense for it to be sort of like goofy with them falling forward. Maybe Goku could have had a couple more frames there at the end. As he's... these screenshots look so funny. The tumble, yeah. And then when they actually stand, I feel like it's a little bit choppy. There are definitely more fluid Dokkan animations than this. Absolutely. Like, as they come to their feet, it feels like... I don't know. It feels like that you can almost see the joints moving, which usually they're so much better about masking that sort of thing. Again, it is a very small detail, and you can call it nitpicking for sure. But again, I mean, that's kind of the point of the series, right? We pick out all the individual aspects of these animations. Of course, the yellow key flies forward. I would have definitely liked a little bit more animation on it, but I mean, I guess it just makes sense for it to be a circle going towards the screen. Again, we have a very nice card art transition here. You know it, that I love it when they animate the actual animation sort of transitioning into the card art with the same scene, right? Obviously, Goku and Vegeta blasting forward. Cooler transitions perfectly into the card art here. Had to take a quick drink of water there. So then, of course, we have the enemy sprite being hit by their attack with the rocks flying forward. This part, I'm glad that they included this, because I was almost kind of thinking that they were just going to have the beam be the finisher. But, of course, Cooler's not completely down for the count in this scene, right? He's still trying to reform, and Vegeta's like, why won't you die? You know, and is blasting him with the key, which I think this part looks pretty good. However, I don't think there's enough recoil on the key blasts. I feel like in the actual movie, Vegeta's like, you know, like straight blasting, right? So anyway, I started blasting, right? I don't think this looks bad by any means, but I definitely feel like that it could have a little bit more impact, for sure, on Vegeta's actual blast, because they feel a lot more casual than I feel like it should for how much they're struggling in this situation, right? Then, of course, we have Goku's Kamehameha. Maybe I was just sleeping for this part of the movie, but I swear that this did not happen this way. I swear Vegeta's attack finished him off. And I'm pretty sure that's the way that it went down. I'm assuming that they just included this to sort of have, again, like the whole Vegeta Goku dynamic thing of both of them contributing to the super attack, right? Like obviously in the beginning we had all those different sections where it was almost like two Goku sections and two Vegeta sections in the 12 key, right? With like the first part of him beating down Cooler, and then the kick from Vegeta, and then the second part of Goku flying forward, and then Vegeta blowing him up, right, with the Big Bang attack. I'm assuming this is something similar here where they both attack together and now they're attacking individually. But yeah, when Vegeta does this attack, he just beats Cooler. Well, beats Cooler. But, you know, that Metal Cooler is destroyed. So it's interesting to me that they sort of ad-libbed this section. And funny enough, I almost feel like Goku looks a little bit janky here. I think the coloring and everything is fine, but Goku's face looks a little bit off to me personally. I also feel like his muscle mass is maybe a little bit off. Maybe it's also just kind of an awkward angle as well. Oh, no. Alright, I need to talk about that part. But yeah, then we have this section, which I think that to anyone watching, this is clearly the weakest part of their animation, right? You have Goku literally 3-frame this, right? He goes from holding his arms back to having the key in his hands, right? To then having it forward with the lighting effect changing drastically immediately here. So like that, I feel like clearly you can tell that this part was ad-libbed because it doesn't look as good, right? And funny enough, I feel like I was talking with some people on the Twitter timeline about these animations the other day when we got the previews for them. And funny enough, that was a topic that came up. Is it a lot of the Dokkan animations that are sort of ad-libbed or where they add in their own stuff or sometimes original stuff can look not as great, not referencing the original anime material, but not even that. It just feels like they, I don't know if they just don't know how to put it together. They don't know what to do, so they just do something really simple. But this feels kind of out of place, to be honest with you, in this animation. Not to mention, this animation is, oh, awful for sure, right? Like, even in the full-time speed, this particular section with Goku doing the Kamehameha, it is so weak in how he brings his arms forward, because obviously it's literally 3 poses as he's bringing it forward, right? This does not have any oomph at all, right? No drive behind it, right? This literally looks like Goku goes, eh, and throws the blast forward, right? And especially, too, I really like this with the different coloring here, right? Like, I think that's cool, and I love when Dokkan does stuff like this. You guys should know that by now, considering how much I always pointed out in the animation analysis videos when they change the coloring of, you know, characters to match the Ki Blast and something like this. And I especially like it like this when they're fully a different color, because it's supposed to be like the light is reflecting on them that heavy. But not only is this Ki Blast literally the size of Goku's palms and should not be like that, it is... the frame before that is this to this. Really, guys? This just feels so out of place. I think this animation would be 10 times better and maybe a contender for their best animation against the active skill if this section wouldn't have been in here. But this section is just so bad to me. Anyhow, as we finally have the key bring the house down, as it were, the key itself kind of doesn't look that great either. I feel like this is a very generic Dokkan key effect here, which I think that they've gotten a lot better about that over time. And even some of the animations that I feel like are a little bit lackluster in the key department, I feel like don't look this generic for a Dokkan Ki Blast, right? Usually they're a lot more animated. I don't know, this just literally feels like the circle growing on the screen sort of thing for me. This transition is really great, though, from the Ki Blast hitting the screen to these fantastic explosion effects. And obviously this is supposed to be like Cooler disintegrating here with these different white effects as they sort of dissipate into the explosion here. And all of the little Ki Blasts as well, the Vegeta shooting off, and you can see the little debris there. This section is super well animated, absolutely. I really, really like this section. Okay. So now we move on to their active skill. I think, bar none, for me personally, This is easily their best animation. When I watched this for the first time, and especially considering how it was framed with, of course, in the promo trailer, they had it as an actual like 1080p video with, 16:9 framing rather than like a phone screen. It actually caught me off guard because I literally thought it was a clip from the anime that they were using for promotional material. And then I did a double take and realized it was Dokkan, right? I think that this entire section is animated super well, right? The little minimal movements are there for everything, right? I know in the slow-mo in the beginning of this, it definitely feels a little bit weird, right? With how like Goku and Vegeta move a little bit, but in the full-time speed, this looks fantastic, right? Like looking at it like this, right? You can see Goku kind of like squat down there a little bit, but again, in full motion, it looks just fine. And especially when they get down to the squatting position, right? It looks good. And obviously you have Goku talking, the lip flaps matching very well as well. I know you can't hear the audio, but promise you on that one they do. Of course, Vegeta coming into frame and being extremely tired here. I will say it is a little bit interesting with this animation too, because maybe it is just because the 12 key is a contributing factor to this, but these animations do feel a little bit all over the place in terms of where they're from. Which usually I'm more for them fully representing a scene or a movie or specific like characters from a movie in this way. But this is obviously right after they defeat the one metal cooler and then they're taking a break. And then obviously they have the metal coolers come over the hill, right? And then they see him and they're like, hey, didn't we beat him, right? And of course then they all come down the mountain, and Goku and Vegeta are getting back up to fight them. For this, maybe it's just because there isn't that section of the, Goku and Vegeta like looking up at the hill. But it's weird because it's like, wait, this is their active skill? They were just fine moments ago. They didn't take any damage. Right? Well, I mean, they took damage, obviously. But you know what I mean, right? It does feel a little bit jarring, for sure. However, the actual animation itself obviously looks fantastic here, right? The little movements on this section look good. The little animation on Goku looks good. This, funny enough, is one time over many, and something that you actually will see that we'll talk about later in this animation too, with their costume change active skill, is holy cow, I wish that Dokkan was higher quality in terms of its actual like game's visual quality, because obviously a lot of the animations can look kind of pixelated because of course the game is 7+ years old and it's running on an engine that old. It's insane that they push the game to the limit that it can look like this, that you can get tricked to think that this is the anime and not the game, right? That's insane. However, with this scene, and again, something that you'll see a little bit later, where it's very pixelated, I really wish Dokkan animations were in true HD, because this would look even better than it already does now, where you can kind of see a little bit of the pixelation. It's hard to see because this is a 720 video, but trust me, for the second active skill, with the costume change, you'll definitely see it in there. The lip flaps, by the way, they definitely nailed it. I know I kind of said that before, but they definitely did a good job of that here. So yeah, with this section too, I think they did a really good job. Obviously, have these very minimal movements here, and you can actually see Goku and Vegeta breathing heavily, which I love, right? It's very hard to see it in the frame by frame, so I'm just going to play it in the slow-mo, right? But you can see them moving up and down with them actually breathing really heavy in this scene, which I love. And I think that that's so cool that they implemented that, because obviously this could have so easily just been them standing there with like a PNG. I didn't even notice as well, the camera very slightly scrolls across the scene as well. Like if we go back to the beginning of this, you can see that it's all the way over here, right? But the fact that they have them breathing with these little movements, right? Especially with the assets being so small on the screen, it makes me feel like with the rest of these animations, they cut corners, because this looks so good. It's so well animated. Like all those little minimal movements that are here and present in this animation, why aren't they in the rest of it, right? In the things that would make this feel so much more lifelike? I don't know. It really makes me feel like they cut corners, or maybe because they had 4 animations of this quality that they needed to do, or 4 units, I guess I should say, with all animations of this quality, that they had to cut corners in some areas and give us less quality animations, obviously with the part 1 and part 2 units, right? Anyway, we have this cut here to Goku screaming up to the heavens. This shot looks really good. Obviously, we have his hair moving here. And then, of course, we have the aura explode around Goku here as he obviously powers up to Super Saiyan. It's kind of funny that they just shake the text here. They've done this for a couple of other essays, but it does look a little bit corny, if I'm being honest. But obviously, that's more so the game rather than the actual animation itself. Now, yeah, Goku's transformation here is so good, dude. So obviously everything leading up to this is very nice. I love the camera angle that they pull this out, right? You have this very beautiful impact frame followed by a white one, and then of course the silhouette of Goku here in the black before it actually shows him in Super Saiyan. And what I really like about this scene is the lighting on Vegeta is perfect, right? This is easily such a good representation of how his hair looks when he sort of has the Super Saiyan ki reflecting on him when he's in base form, right? It's a little bit more brown rather than black, right? Looks really, really nice for sure. This looks basically exactly like how the movie, like when I watched this scene in the movie, I was impressed after watching the Dokkan animation before that, because I was like, wow, this looks literally like the animation. It's so good. Obviously, we have Vegeta's hair moving a little bit here too, which looks good. And of course, same dealio with our boy Vegeta as he's screaming to the heavens and powering up. You have these very, very nice impact frames here. Funny enough, interestingly, that's almost like a shadow coming from Goku there, sort of. That's pretty cool. Obviously, you have the sort of light reflect off him. And then, of course, the sort of aura emanating off of them, which, again, straight out of the movie. And the lighting effects, again, look so good here. They do a stellar job of this. How it looks on the ground, obviously, their Super Saiyan aura emanating off of them. And this part looks great, too, right? Funny enough, I know some people might say the coolers look a little bit goofy in the way that they're moving, but that is basically how they looked in the movie coming towards them. Like, that's pretty spot on, if I do say so myself. In terms of the actual aura itself, man, they did a good job on this for sure, right? The aura flaring up looks absolutely fantastic, if I do say so myself, right? The way that it sort of moves and grows here feels very natural, almost like a flame, right? Looks great. You also have the power sort of emanating off, and look at that. As that circle comes off of the aura, you can see it actually sort of dissipate off, which looks really, really nice for sure. Then, of course, we have the sky turn a little bit dark as the aura grows more intense before it explodes outward, and we now have the white flash out, which is great. I think that is easily their best animation out of everything here. What we're about to look at may contend with that, but I really, really like the way that that active skill looks for sure. Okay, so now we move on to their final animation here, right? First of all, thank you for the white fade. Appreciate it. We have Goku talking here, and I really like that they have this sort of anime effect very present in Dragon Ball Z, where the characters almost like shake a little bit in the animation, right? Sort of to show the intensity, and obviously that's sort of like the animation style a little bit. They definitely nail that pretty well with Goku here, right? You can see him sort of going a little bit, right? Looks good. The lip flaps look absolutely fantastic here for sure. And obviously, this is the part where Goku goes Super Saiyan. You have him talking for a little bit here. Again, this whole asset looks so good. This is another example, by the way, and you're going to see it even more in a moment, where I really wish Dokkan was in True HD, because you can kind of see the pixels on Goku's nose and a little bit on the edge of some of the assets here. But this section looks pretty good, right? Obviously, you have Goku stand tall. I will say, I do wish there was a tiny bit more animation in between him going from base to Super Saiyan. Like this section here, oh, that's so raw, so cool. Obviously with a little bit of the yellow aura sort of reflecting off the bottom of his hair right before he goes Super Saiyan. Looks great. This is the one time I will say them masking it with an impact frame. I really wish there would have been more in between. It doesn't look terrible by any means. It doesn't even really look bad. But I just wish there was a little bit more animation on the transformation, right? I know it is supposed to be a quick transformation, but it feels a little bit too jarring to me. Goku moving up here. I will say some of the way that his body does move a little bit in this entire section does feel a little bit weird, even in the full motion of it. It still looks a little bit weird. Like, look how small his face looks here. My man got that big forehead. Obviously, his pecs here is growing a little bit. You know, and as he moves, like, this just looks disgusting. But, of course, this is an in-between frame. You're not really supposed to look at this. This is kind of like the same thing as animation smearing, but not exactly. Sort of the same concept, I guess. Obviously, then you have Goku get into the standing position here. I will say, maybe it is also a little bit awkward because of the angle change. You're obviously a lot more closer in Goku's face, sort of at a kitty corner angle to him. And then you have him move back where he is almost more like facing Metal Cooler properly, right, in terms of the angle that he's at now. So I think it's definitely a little bit jarring with it changing at that angle too. But Goku in the Super Saiyan does look good. I feel like the black lines look a lot thicker, though, than just, like, moments ago. I don't know, like, it kind of looks like a little bit of almost a slightly different style, but, like, nothing too crazy. But it is definitely a little bit jarring, for sure, seeing it go from that to that, I think, anyway. But, yeah. I'm laughing at the sprite, don't worry. Look at this goofy boy just sliding forward like that. Again, that is absolutely a sprite moment, if I do say so myself. This is also, of course, the part where Goku would be getting caught by the wires. So, of course, it does feel a little bit empty for this section because, of course, he should be getting wrapped up here by the enemy. So obviously, that's why this section feels a little bit weird here. But then, of course, we have Vegeta's contribution, which is this very, very nicely animated scene where we have this sort of almost like tunnel of light, which obviously this is supposed to represent like how fast the key is moving towards Cooler, right? And you can see the disc come through. The disc looks great, by the way. I love the little lighting effects that they have on the edges of it, where it's sort of like these dashed lines almost around it, rather than like a just circle, really. Oh, funny enough, his arm is actually already cut off. That's really funny. Or what? Wait, his arm is cut off and then it goes back together? That is extremely strange. That is really strange. Interesting. That's, again, more of an L on the sprite's part rather than the actual animation. So, this, though, does feel so weird to me. Because you have this really great shot of the Ki Blast approaching, right? And then the payoff is nothing, basically. You have the enemy fly in, and this explosion effect is definitely reused. This is a ancient Dokkan explosion effect right here. This is old, bro. This explosion effect here is just... This looks like a year one Dokkan explosion, for sure. It almost makes me think they just yoinked it from that. Maybe they made it for this, maybe not. But this just doesn't look great. You're telling me they couldn't animate something with, like, the actual disc, like, just at least going through the sprite? Like, the sprite doesn't have to split in half, because obviously that's not possible with the game is coded, right? The way that it's coded. But even with Tech Vegeta from the original super attack that they did for this scene in Dokkan, right? Funny enough, we took a look at that in the AGL Metal Cooler movie. They had the screen split apart with a little bit of yellow light on the edges of that to sort of make it feel like that the screen is getting split by the actual disc. You're telling me this is the best they could do? A stinky explosion effect? After this fantastic scene? The best thing they could do was a wet fart? You're kidding me, bro. So strange, considering, like, look how good the follow-up scene looks. Even the explosion effect here looks so much better than the other one. You have this beautiful shot, right, of Vegeta here, standing proud after firing the disc, right? You can obviously see the parts of the big Getty star here, and that all looks fantastic, right? It's very well put in its perspective of, like, the wall actually looks like it's the background, and that looks like it's a little bit closer, but still farther away from Vegeta, right? That all looks really, really good. Obviously, the explosion effect sort of dissipates, and again, that still looks so much better than the one from before. But you cut to this beautiful shot of obviously the close-up of Vegeta, you know, after he throws the disc, which looks really, really nice here, right? Super crispy, looks just like the style of the movie, right? Really, really like this scene. I think it's perfect for the active skill too. Obviously, having both Goku and Vegeta talk in the active skill. This was the perfect way to do it, I think. So here, okay. So now we have the part where Goku throws this little ki blast at Cooler here. Now this part is kind of interesting because this part is in slow-mo in the movie, and it is also in slow-mo in the actual animation for Dokkan. You can tell that it's even a little bit slower than the already slow-mo that we're in, right? Now, before I talk about the animation, I wanted to get this part out of the way because this was the exact part that I was talking about before. Jeez, oh boy. Okay, we'll talk about that in a moment. But Goku here, right? Look at my man's face. Just take that in for a second, right? And look closely. Do you see how pixelated that looks, right? This is literally the scene that I was thinking of when I was talking about before how I really wish that Dokkan animations were in true HD, because what is happening here is basically they have to compress the SA assets to be able to fit in the game's files and to work with the game's code and all that sort of thing. So they can't make the assets as high quality as they necessarily could be because of the game's engine. And so it comes out with stuff like this, where the animation itself still looks pretty good. And obviously this scene looks really good. It would look pretty good upscaled too, I'm sure. But obviously it looks a little bit crunchy because, of course, that's just unfortunately the way that Dokkan looks because it's such an old game, right? That's not really the animation's fault, and I don't even really think that's a bad thing necessarily. That's just more a result of, you know, the game is 7+ years old. But I just wanted to mention that just because I thought it was interesting. Anyway, let's talk about this section of the animation. So, obviously we have Goku opening his hand here, which I think this section looks really, really good, actually. I love the way that this is animated. I think it looks good, and obviously you have the ki blast in his hand. I do wish there was a little bit of a different cut here. I feel like they could have done something where maybe like a turning shot to Goku, or maybe like the shot, or the camera rather, going around Goku to sort of be a little bit more dynamic rather than just cutting from, oh, small ball in his hand to it's already glowing quite a bit and now we are behind Goku, right? I wish there was a little bit more in between that for sure. This shot where he moves back is definitely a little bit janky for sure. It's not like super bad or anything like that, right? Let's go to the end of him opening his hand so it's a little bit easier here. But I feel like there should definitely be a couple more frames in between for sure, right? Like this to this is definitely a little bit jarring in full motion for sure. But yeah, so then obviously we have Goku turn his head a little bit. You can also see kind of like the pixelation on Goku here too. Obviously they're pushing the assets to the limit basically. So, and again, that's kind of the way that the game outputs them. Because if you take a look at these assets in the actual files, like when I post them on Twitter, they don't look like this crunchy, right? They look pretty good. But again, that's because the game has to compress them to make it work. But anyway, we have this nice shot of Goku here that I will say the perspective on this is really cool. With obviously Goku's hand very far back, but it's it kind of looks like Goku's holding the camera here, funny enough. But obviously this is a super iconic shot from the movie. We have Goku bring his hand forward to sort of throw the ki blast forward. Now, this is going to look really, really goofy in the frame by frame, and we will take one final look at this in the normal speed. Because obviously the way that Goku's body contorts here and the way that his face changes looks a little bit weird. But it's because they're trying to make this feel a little bit more 3D, almost like a rotoscoping effect, right? We've talked about rotoscoping in the past, where it is the effect of trying to make 2D images look 3D by putting the 2D images together in quick succession to make them almost feel like you're looking at a 3D model when it is just a bunch of images together, right? That's sort of the effect that they're going for here. Now, does it really pull through for that? I still feel like even so, this animation is a little bit janky, right? That shot does not look good at all, but again, these are like in-between frames that you're not really supposed to see. That is kind of insane, though, that is in a modern-day essay. I don't think I've seen a Goku face look that bad in a modern essay in a long time. That is a little bit alarming, I'm not going to lie to you. But obviously, we have Goku throw the blast here, which I kind of wish there was a little bit more in between these two. Like, they have so much build-up to him actually throwing it, and then he just, I don't know. I wish there was a little bit more follow-through on the actual throw here. And then, of course, we have it zoom into Goku's face. with the Ki Blast colliding with Cooler here. And the explosion effect actually looks really, really good for this. Obviously, we have the light beam sort of flying off of him. And then a little bit of a faraway shot. Obviously, this was sort of the platform that Goku and Vegeta fight Metal Cooler on inside the big Getty star, where there's obviously this big, like, ring around them almost. I will say, this is a little bit jarring, going from the super high quality Goku and Vegetas to this section right here. But let's take a look at that Goku throw in full motion now. Just to see. Again, I still feel like, and again, I know it's supposed to be in slow motion, but it still looks really awkward to me. This part here, too, it is interesting because you can see they stretch his arm a little bit at the very, very end. You can see that instead of actually animating it moving, which this is something that a lot of old Dokkan animations do, funny enough, is they just stretch the actual image, almost like you're clicking the corner in Photoshop and then just changing the size of the image, right? Rather than actually moving the assets themselves, they're literally just changing the size of the image and the way that it looks. I still feel like this looks really awkward. Again, I'm sure in 2x speed it will look much, much better. And even though you can't see those very not great faces in between here as it's moving in the slow-mo, obviously it's a lot harder to catch, right? If you really focus on it, you could see them. But obviously, it's a lot harder to see them when he's moving that quick. And again, like I said, in 2x speed, you probably won't even be able to tell. But it still feels very awkward to me, personally. Like, I think the thing is, it's not the fact that it's in slow-mo, because that looks fine in the movie. It almost feels like his different chunks of his body are moving here in like different pieces and in different succession, right? Like his different muscles almost feel like they're moving independently of one another rather than his body moving like a natural human body. I think that's the best way that I can describe it to you, why I think it feels awkward. Okay, so for the ending shot here, obviously we have the explosion, or of course after Goku throws the energy ball at Cooler, which again, that shot looks fantastic if I do say so myself. We have the beams flying off. You can actually see the enemy sprite in there a little bit. I didn't even notice that the first time. Goku and Vegeta standing there watching the explosion. And of course, the explosion effect looks fantastic, right? Does Goku raise his hand to cover his eyes, or was it always like that? Oh, he does. That's cool. That's a nice attention to detail. Even Vegeta, too, they sort of lift their hands to cover up their eyes there. That is such a small detail that they included there. See? That's what I'm saying. They bothered to include these super small details and these small pieces of movement for something that you're probably not going to see because it happens so quickly, but they don't do it in the shots where you're more likely to notice in 12 key and 18 key. I don't understand. So weird. But anyway, we have the explosion effect sort of envelop Goku and Vegeta. This looks really cool, by the way, where it actually sort of takes them over a little bit. And they actually have them properly animated flying back, because in the movie you can see them sort of get enveloped by the explosion and fall backwards, obviously with the explosion pushing them back from how impactful it is. And we have the cutaway to the big Getty star outside of space, which that's literally how it happened in the movie, so it makes sense why it looks like that. The actual big Getty star explosion also looks really, really nice, if I do say so myself. This whole shot, actually, too, of it in space looks really, really nice. Looks basically just like the anime in terms of the animation style, right? Yeah, the little lights flicker in here, and then obviously the final explosion effect. Final explosion, Vegeta. Looks good. I think this all looks pretty good for this final end bit here. And then we do have the KO screen to boot, which of course is Goku and Vegeta falling down to Namek, which is of course the end of the movie where they're like, did they make it out okay? Right? And of course they're falling down with Vegeta literally conked out, and Goku of course with one eye sort of cocked open there. The one thing I will say, I am really glad that they included this KO screen, because when I watched the movie, I completely forgot about this scene. And when I saw that, I was like, man, I really hope that's their KO screen. So I'm glad it was included. However, why is this so far away? I don't know. I feel like this would be so much better if like Goku and Vegeta were so much closer to the camera here, right? Like Vegeta should take up all this space on the screen and Goku should easily take up all the space on this screen. I don't know, or on this side of the screen rather, excuse me. I don't know why it's so far away. Very weird. But I'm glad that they included that nonetheless. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So, we are finally complete with Goku and Vegeta's animations. Holy cow, this may be the longest animation analysis video to date. We're going to have to see how Cooler goes as well, how long that one will be. I am still very conflicted on these. I think my overall thoughts are this. Overall, the animations themselves look solid, right? They look pretty good, right? I don't think that they are bad by any stretch of the imagination, right? They're fairly well animated. They have a pretty good representation of the movie. The style of the movie is also pretty well represented here, right? I think that they are a good representation of all of the scenes that are the core scenes of Goku and Vegeta in this movie, right? I don't think that we probably ever need another Goku and Vegeta from this movie, because I think this pretty much covers everything from the movie, right? That being said, there are a lot of parts in this animation that feel like corners were cut and certain animations don't look as good as they could. There is a surprising amount of sliding PNGs in here, like way more than I thought in the initial viewing of these, and especially with the previews that they got, or that we got rather, of these. I think that, you know, there is a lot more of that sort of shenanigans, I guess, going on in these animations than initially thought, right? This really does make me think that all four of these units, because you guys know if you watched my original videos about Cooler and Goku that I didn't really feel satisfied with either of their animations. They weren't bad, but I didn't think they were as good as they could be. And I think these units almost emphasize that even more, right? If I have to make a bold take here, even though I think these animations are more interesting to look at and there's more action going on here, there's certainly more action-packed, I think from a technical standpoint, they're actually animated worse, which I know may be a little criminal to say. Maybe not worse than Birdcoo's active skill. But overall, like, and again, comparing them to Goku and Cooler here, right? I feel like they're just not as technically sound. There is too many problems with these for me to confidently say that they are as good as they could be. I still don't think that our current king of the best animations in the game, right, like the 7th year LRs and Trunks and Vegeta, I don't think these guys top them by any stretch of the animation, or that's funny. By any stretch of the imagination, they still look good, but there's just way too many problems and inconsistencies, and again, sliding PNGs, basically too many things that almost look like they're taken from older Dokkan essays to make me really confidently say that these are better than those, or the best, or as good as they could be, just contained within their own right. But let me know what you think of these animations in the comments section below. I am going to be very curious to hear what you all have to say about these. Thank you guys so much for watching. Definitely check out the Metal Cooler video, of course. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and if you made it this far in the video. Comment which unit you're going to be pulling for. I want to hear it. Without further ado, I will catch you guys in the next one. Dokkan Assets out. Peace.